Hey everyone, it's dragonrider. Time for another Theorycraft video, and let's talk about Festival of Legends and Demon Hunter. Now, I personally really liked some of the Demon Hunter decks that were around the last couple of years and things that have gone on with Demon Hunter. I didn't like it at first, but I've liked it more over time, and Kurtrus was a big reason for that. So now that Kurtrus is actually rotating out of Standard, I'm a little sad. Let's take a look at this deck that I put together for theory crafting, and I went for an aggressive list here. You can see this tops out, 2 and 3, and it tops out with one card at 5. Tops out at just a single Bone Glaive. I considered putting 2, but just with some of the other cards that I wanted to include, I only ended up putting in 1. Plus, kind of expensive, and I think you really want to lean into the magnifying glaives for the weapons if you're going to want to be equipping a weapon and attacking. So just 1 Bone Glaive, but 5 attack and some dredge, pretty good. Of course, still want to include some of the stuff that we have already seen in the most recent iterations of Aggro Demon Hunter. So things like the Sightless Magistrate, and again, the that magnifying glaive. Of course, you want to have those for draw. And some of this is still kind of the same. Dispose of Evidence, stuff like Battle Fiend, Vicious Slither Spear. I'm including Astalor in this. I've seen it sometimes and sometimes not in these decks, but I think on a 4-set meta, the Astalor for some of these aggressive decks especially is going to be really good. Hopefully, if you have not been able to close out the game with this list, by the time you get to the later game, you can have Astalor to kind of close things out. The one drawback to Astalor with things like the Magnifying Glaive and the Magistrate for draw is that Astalor puts the next piece into your hand, so that does take up a hand space. So this is one that maybe we could see removing, but again, like I said, 4-set meta makes me want to include this. So of course you still have some strong minions like Bibliomite, but I also wanted to put in some of the new strong minions like Static Waveform. I think will be a fantastic addition to an aggressive deck like this. It's a 3-mana 5/6. Yes, it's going to lose 1 health or 1 attack per turn. You don't get to choose, but that's a 3-mana 5/6, or at least a 3-mana 5/5 or 4/5 when you get to attack with it. And that seems pretty huge. Even being able to coin this out on turn 2 is quite a good stat line for an aggressive deck. And there's no drawback necessarily. I guess the losing the stats is a drawback, but it's not quite the same drawback as the Bibliomite. So I do kind of also like trying out this Static Waveform, see how strong that is. And then the new card, Rowdy Fan, as well. Really want to try this one out. I think adding 4 attack to a minion while this is alive, and this has 5 health on it, is going to be fantastic for an aggro deck, especially at 3 mana. And getting something out on turn 2 and then playing Rowdy Fan on turn 3 is like an aggressive deck's dream. So I'm pretty excited for that. I think these will be very, very good inclusions in this aggressive deck. And we have Kayn Sunfury coming back in the core set, so absolutely I want to try this. He's a 3 attack charge minion, and if someone is trying to play taunts, you can just ignore that, and you still get to hit face with Kayn or a weapon swing or other minions that you have on the board. So really excited to see Kayn back and how he might be able to help some of these aggressive decks. And then, of course, I still wanted to include some spells and some other things. And I love Lady Steno. I think Lady Steno is such a great tool for dealing additional damage and being able to get some good value out of some of the spells. So, of course, the Dispose of Evidence, you're still running Chaos Strike that still gets you a draw as well. The multi-strikes, Spectral Sight for draw. Don't necessarily know if I need Spectral Sights or not, since there is so much other draw. I could definitely see putting in some other damage here instead. But the big downside, I think, is things like Fel Barrage rotating out. Unfortunately, not going to be able to push some extra damage with that. And I didn't include like the relic package in this. I just didn't think that you would want to do that in this deck. So No relic stuff, no Fell Barrage because that's leaving standard. The new card Taste of Chaos I thought could be pretty interesting, but it's only 2 damage to a minion. But in this aggressive list, I wanted to put things that were going to be able to hit face. So that's why with Lady Steno, there are some spells here. Of course, you have Predations. These are fantastic. But I didn't, want to include some of those other things. And then the other one that I wanted to try out is this Glaive Shark. It hasn't really seen play before, but again, as I mentioned with the Astalor, I think this actually could be pretty great in a 4-set meta, and that's what we're entering in here. There's not going to be as many options for cards, and this is all enemies. This is 2 damage to all enemies. Being able to just use a hero power or the multiple weapons that I have included in this deck, I think is going to be huge for getting Glaive Shark to actually have this benefit. So it's 2 damage AoE, 2 damage that also hits face because it just says all enemies, and it leaves a body behind. So I really want to try this one out. I think this might be okay. This is one where maybe you want to test around some other stuff. Maybe you want to try Fossil Fanatics for after your hero attacks, drawing a Fell spell. You could try a couple other things, but this to me just felt like it could be a decent inclusion, and being able to just hit for a hero power and then play this seemed pretty good. So this is my aggro Demon Hunter. Let me know what you think, and I'll have the code for it as well in the description. So if you want to try this out in those first couple of days of the expansion, that code will be there for you. And now looking at our community submitted deck, thank you so much to everyone who did submit with that Google form. This deck is from Viv. This is an Outcast deck with Photographer Fizzle and some top end. Now, Viv specifically noted that it was Outcast with Fizzle and top end, so I wanted to point that out. But let's take a look at this deck. This is a pretty cool one. I do really like the relics, personally. I've been a fan of them from the start, so definitely includes the relic stuff. Of course, the relic package, right? You have the relic vault, the 3 relics, and the Zymox at the top end. Makes a lot of sense to just include all of those. Zillag, love Zillag. So, of course, you got to have that. The hero cards and quest lines are rotating out, but Colossals staying in. So, pretty big impact here with the Zillag. And now, this seems like kind of a Rush and Outcast package combined for the rest of the deck. So things like this Fierce Outsider, this just 1 mana rushing, creating your next Outcast to be cheaper. Of course, the Illidari Studies, this is coming in to the core set. So we're getting Illidari Studies back. Illidari Studies was pretty solid when it was in standard before. So I like that inclusion there. And both of these so far, cheap things that also make the next Outcast stuff cheaper. So it's like a chain, and you'd probably be able to play quite a bit in one turn. Of course, the relics, Astalor seems like a solid choice. Now, Instrument Tech, this is a pretty interesting one. Drawing a weapon. So if we look and see like what weapons there are, we have the Glaive Tar, which I think this is the only weapon in here, but the Glaive Tar, this new instrument weapon, is the 4 attack, 2 durability, and when the Death Rattle triggers, you draw cards, and you can improve it by playing Outcast. So could be quite a bit of Outcast cards played for this, and then being able to draw and refill seems pretty great, but just the 4 attack on this I like a lot. And I think this is probably going to have some good value in this deck. Just being able to work in combination with some of the relic stuff. Only 1 Relic of Dimensions included in here, which I think is probably pretty reasonable. It's not really leaning super hard into the relic stuff. But between the Glaive Tar getting some draw, the Relic of Dimensions, some other things that generate Outcast cards, it seems like probably going to have a hand size issue in some games potentially is one concern looking at this. So I kind of respect the only 1 Relic of Dimensions, especially at 6 mana now. It was really good at 5. Of course, some of the new cards here, more rush minions and Outcast, so being able to rush these The snake bite that has a rush and increasing based on minions that die works really well with this security. Wayward Sage, again, another Outcast card that's reducing cost of stuff. So kind of a lowish curve that has the top end. Of course, it has this legendary Halveria to add attack to the rush minions as well. I think there's going to be a lot of turns potentially where some of this stuff ends up being pretty cheap to play. You can probably play quite a bit in one turn with how many Outcast discounts and stuff there are here. Wretched Exile, after you play an Outcast, add a random Outcast to your hand, so going to be a lot of value in here. And the Photographer Fizzle, very, very interesting. You take a snapshot of your hand and shuffle it into your deck. It's going to basically, it copies your hand, puts it into a spell, that spell gets shuffled into your deck. And again, with all the draw, there is the Glaive Tars, the Relic of Dimensions. There's going to be some draw there, so going to be able to hopefully pull that back and replay some of the stuff, which I think also because of that fizzle kind of makes up, I think, in a way for that other Relic of Dimensions, because if you have some relic stuff in your hand, you could play that Photographer Fizzle. You're basically copying more relics anyways, so seems pretty good. And if you have discounted stuff in your hand, the Photographer Fizzle snapshots all that discounted things, all the discounted things in your hand. Then later you play that and you play the photograph spell, put all that discounted stuff back in your hand again. So much value. This is not, even though it is looking like a lower curve, this does not feel like an aggressive deck like what I built. This definitely feels like a value heavy, consistent, like every turn value type of deck. And also want to mention these Vengeful Wallopers in here. 6 mana, 5/5 demons with the rush, of course, but also costs less for each Outcast card. So there's going to be a lot of value and a lot of stuff to do every turn, I think, with this deck. Of course, the Rush the Stage, the new spell that draws. So tons of draw in here, tons of discounting. This is going to be a deck that's pretty interesting. If this deck can work and be competitive, this is going to be a deck that I feel like will never feel the same to play. And I think that's why I like it. There's a lot of value, a lot of things, but generating things every turn, drawing through, I think it's going to create a feeling of actually being able to have variations in the gameplay every time that you play it. And I think that's really cool. So I'm kind of excited. I think I'm going to try this one for sure and see how it goes. I will say I'm not a huge fan of the Outcast mechanic in general. Just, I think a lot of the Outcast stuff more recently has felt very lackluster. So definitely excited to try with kind of more of this, combining packages into one deck and see how it goes. The amount of things in this deck that do something without this being a Renathal deck also is amazing to me. So thank you so much, Viv, for the submission. And we'll have this deck code in the description as well. Those are some pretty interesting Demon Hunter decks. Can't wait to give them a try. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't already, go ahead and check out this video next, looking at the Death Knight deck list and see what kind of spicy things we've got going over in the Death Knight theory crafting. And I'll see you in the next one.